And now, book at bedtime. Dan Stevens begins The Coral Thief, the compelling new novel by Rebecca Stott. Set in Paris following Napoleon's surrender, it's a story of love and the seductive power of revolutionary ideas.
When, at the age of 21, I travelled to Paris from Edinburgh by mail coach, carrying in my luggage 3 rare fossils and the bone of a mammoth, I still believed time travelled in straight lines. It was July 1815, only a few weeks after Napoleon had been defeated by the Allies at Waterloo. War with France was over. Restitution had begun. The borders were open again. Time stretched out like a long road in front of me, towards a vocation. I was to be a man of science, assistant to the illustrious Baron Georges Cuvier, professor of comparative anatomy in the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. In the dark early hours, sitting on the outside of the mail coach a few miles from Paris, I woke to the sound of a woman's voice speaking in French. I opened my eyes as a tall figure, her head obscured by the hood of her cloak, climbed into the seat beside me. Groaning with the effort, the driver passed up to her a large bundle wrapped in a red velvet blanket. It was a sleeping child. I could just make out a dimpled hand, the sleep-hot flush of a cheek, and a curl of dark hair. The woman spoke softly to the child, soothing it, rearranging the folds of its blankets. "There are several empty seats inside, madame," I said in French, concentrating hard on my pronunciation. She answered me in perfect English. "But who would want to sit inside on a night like this?" Her voice was surprisingly low for a woman. The black of the sky was already shading to a deep inky blue towards the horizon. Mist hung over the fields and hedgerows and gathered a little in the trees on either side of the road. "Is it safe in France for a woman to travel alone?" I asked as the coach lurched back into movement. The Edinburgh newspapers regularly reported attacks on carriages travelling at night across open country. She laughed and turned towards me, her face illuminated by the light of a half-moon. "But I am not travelling alone," she said, dropping her voice to a whisper and leaning towards me. "I have Delphine. What about you, monsieur?" "I have never left Britain before," I stammered. "I've never travelled so far or had to make myself understood in another language. 3 times I decided I must take the next mail coach back to Calais. I never felt so much of a coward." She laughed, her voice mesmerizing in the darkness. "There it is. Paris. See the lights ahead on the horizon? We will be there by dawn. Imagine." She stopped suddenly, gazing out towards the flattened shapes of the distant hills against the blue-black sky. "Sometimes it's easier to see all that water in the darkness." "I can't see any water," I said, confused. She pointed from right to left. "Everything you see from there to there, the entire Paris basin, was under water thousands of years ago. Picture it. Giant sea lizards swimming around us, oysters and corals beneath us. When the water retreated, the creatures pulled themselves onto the rocks to make new bodies with scales and fur and feathers. Mammoths wandered down from the hills to drink from the Seine, under the same moon as this one, calling to one another." "That's a strange thing to think about," I said. "Oui," she laughed. "I suppose it is. But I think about it often, this earth before man. It took thousands of years for these bodies of ours to take shape, for our clever eyes and our curious brains to come to be. And now that we are big and strong, we think everything belongs to us, that we know and own everything." "Come to be?" I said, surprised and a little alarmed. "So you think species have changed? You are a student of Professor Lamarck, the transformist." "I was once," she said. "Lamarck is right about most things. Species are not fixed. Everything is changing. All the time. Professor Jameson had warned me back in Edinburgh.
Paris is riddled with infidels. They are poets, these French transformists, not men of science. They dream up notions about the origins of the earth and the transmutation of species. Most of them are atheists, too. Heretics. So steer clear.
It will get bigger, you know, she said, her eyes shining in the dark with a touch of malevolence. What will? The city. It doesn't look so big now, at night, but it will swallow you up. Are you not afraid? Yes, I smiled. Yes, of course I'm afraid. Paris aroused complicated feelings in me then. I'd always been a country boy. I knew the insides of the cave networks and mine workings of Derbyshire. I knew the angles and curves of the hills, the names of trees, ferns, lichens and fishes. But I knew almost nothing of cities. Edinburgh, quiet, solid, rainy Edinburgh, hewn out of the rock and built across a ravine, where I had lived and worked for 4 years, had overwhelmed me as a 17-year-old boy, arriving by carriage one frosty morning. Despite the best efforts of my fellow students, I had lived largely amongst books. Now that I had graduated, I wanted more than anything to be a part of what was happening in Paris. The conversations and discoveries in the debating rooms, the libraries and the museums. The French professors, given authority, freedom and money by Napoleon, were making new inroads into knowledge. I had seen drawings of the buildings and squares and streets the emperor had built, the vast classical perspective of the Arc du Carrousel and the Arc de Triomphe, the imperial aspirations of the emperor laid serenely on top of fire, blood and death. Now that Napoleon had been captured, Wellington had restored the French king to the throne. Louis XVIII, they called this one. But everyone was still half expecting Napoleon to rise again, like a body that just wouldn't drown. Anything could happen. And I wanted to be there to see it, whatever it was going to be. Daniel, into the lion's den, she said. How do you know my name? In the half-light of the morning, I could see her face for the first time against the black folds of her hood. She was darkly, heavily beautiful. A woman of middle years with black eyes and olive skin, her voice low and lingering. Your name is Daniel Connor. You are studying anatomy at the medical school in Edinburgh. You have written up your dissertation, probably, I think, on something to do with generation or embryology, the circulation of the blood in the fetus. How did you... And now you come to Paris to study at the Jardin des Plantes, Monsieur Daniel Connor. You think about philosophical questions. What else? Am I correct so far? How can you possibly know that? My voice was shaky. I was tired, I reminded myself. Just that. She laughed again, and gestured towards my travelling bag, which sat between us on the seat, open. You are labelled, my friend. Here. She ran her fingers over the letters engraved on the inside of the bag. You see? Daniel Connor, Medical School, Edinburgh. I guessed the rest. You are easy to read. That is not fair, I said, relieved. You have taken advantage of me. You see, she said, I am a great investigator. We say enquêter. There are many Edinburgh medical students like you in Paris now. They come to listen to the French professors of the Jardin des Plantes, Professors Lamarck, Cuvier, and Geoffroy. I like to watch them. They amuse me. I didn't like to think of myself as just one of many, but she was right. For me and for hundreds of other medical students, all possible roads led to the great Jardin des Plantes. 12 venerable French professors lived in the Jardin, in elegant houses built amongst the museums, libraries, glasshouses and lecture halls. Professors who between them knew how to formulate questions about everything in nature, and would soon, without doubt, I believed, know all the answers. In a few weeks, Professors Lamarck and Cuvier and Geoffroy would no longer be merely names on scientific papers or abstracts. They would become real people to me, fellow explorers and patrons. The prospect awed me. "How long will you stay in Paris, Monsieur Daniel Connor?" "I don't know yet. I have 6 months' employment at the Museum of Comparative Anatomy, working for Professor Cuvier on a new volume of his book, some illustration, some dissecting. After that I have a little money. My uncle died and left me a small inheritance. I shall use it to travel. My father does not approve. He thinks I should buy a practice in Derbyshire and settle down, or study for the church. He says I'm a dilettante. He says philosophical questions are of no practical use in this world. He does not like France or the French." "If your father hates the French," the woman said, "why does he let you come here?" "My professor at Edinburgh wrote to him several times, pressing my case." I did not tell her how many times Jameson had used the word exceptional in his letter to my father, or that he had described me as the finest student in my year. "So, you will take the grand tour?" "Well, no, not like that. Paintings and ruins are interesting enough, but it's the natural history collections and libraries I want to see. Knowledge, not art. That's what's important now. We will soon discover the key to all of nature's laws. Soon we will know God's purpose and design." "God's design?" she said. "Are God and nature the same thing, or different? I find that a difficult question. Nature. Is she God's agent, his servant, doing his work for him, following his plan, or can she go her own way?" "I don't know," I said. She baffled me. I had never met a woman who thought about philosophical questions. "You have a letter of introduction to Professor Cuvier?" she asked, yawning. "Yes, from Professor Jameson, and some specimens to present. Do you know him, Cuvier? What is he like?" "He is stiff," she said, "rather formal in his manner, but clever, very clever. A very important man in France. The natural history collection at the museum in the Jardin is beyond compare. I envy you, seeing it for the first time. I would like to show you, take you there." In a sleeping village on the outskirts of Paris, the mail coach stopped to change the horses. "I can't keep my eyes open any longer," my companion said. "I shall sleep. You should too." I leaned against the leather side of the seat, watching the hunched silhouette of the driver beneath me, his clothes coming into colour in the light of the morning, steam rising from the backs of the horses. I glanced over at the woman who had pulled her cloak around her, and the child, Delphine, curled in sleep, and wondered why I had not asked her more questions. What else did she know? I felt the mail coach lurch one last time, and, tired and hungry, I fell asleep, thinking of mammoths lumbering in the dark. When the mail coach stopped at the Barrière of Saint-Denis an hour later, I woke to find the woman and the child gone, along with my travel bag and the small cases containing the specimens. She had left me only my identity papers and my wallet, which had been placed under my arm as I slept. The mail coach turned into a wide-covered courtyard, where half a dozen other coaches were drawing up at the same time. Drivers were unloading towers of luggage from roofs, porters were bustling about and attendants shouting. There were nursemaids, carpet bags, hat boxes, cloaks and trunks everywhere. "Hotel Corneille," I said to the first porter who met my eye. He lifted my 3 suitcases onto his handcart and set off on foot. I followed close behind, lest the man suddenly take off with the rest of my possessions. On each side of the street, shopkeepers were opening up their doors to morning trade, setting up their windows and shop fronts. Paris was now a military encampment for the Allies. Everywhere, uniforms made a mosaic of colour in the morning sun. Prussians in blue, Hungarians in dark green, Austrians in white, British in red, and the French in blue and red decorated with silver. In the rooms I had taken in the hotel in Saint-Germain, as close as I could afford to the Académie des Sciences, I washed, changed my clothes, and paced the small bedroom between the window and the sink for 20 minutes or so, talking to myself, veering light-headedly between self-accusation and outrage. I was trying to remember the features of the woman's face so I could report the theft to the police at the Bureau de Sûreté when there was a knock on the door. A heavily built, bearded young man with bright eyes stood on the threshold of the hotel landing, clutching a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Before I had time to speak, he had stepped into my room, set the bottle and glasses down, and clasped my hand warmly.
"A fellow countryman,"
he said, in a lilting Scottish accent.
"The concierge has been talking about you for days, ever since you wrote to reserve the rooms here. My name's William Robertson. I was at the medical school at Edinburgh, too. Been in Paris a year."
He uncorked the bottle with his teeth.
"Glad to meet you, Monsieur Connor."
"Daniel," I said. "Daniel Connor. Mr. Robertson, can you tell me where the Bureau de la Sûreté is?"
"Actually, everyone calls me Finn," he said, "because I'm supposed to look like a fish. It's the mouth, I think."
He passed me a glass of champagne and began to look over my books and equipment which lay scattered on the bed.
"You don't want to use those guidebooks," he said. "I'll show you around. Be glad to. William Robertson will give you his personal tour of Paris. Where do you want to start?"
"The Bureau de la Sûreté."
"Why the bollocks would you want to go there?"
"I'm in trouble." I told Finn about the theft. Well, I tried to explain, but of course I couldn't. There was no logic to it. I could see the consequences, though. I could see the future rolling out, or rather not rolling out, clearly enough. No chance to prove to Professor Cuvier that Jameson was right to choose me over the rest. No way to prove that I was exceptional. All that work, all that time, the late nights, the exams, the books, come to nothing.
"I'm sure Cuvier's a reasonable man,"
Finn said, taking a chair in the corner where the morning sun fell in slanting lines.
"I'd write to Jameson and get him to send another set of letters. That should take a week or 2 at most, and then you can start over."
It's worse. I was carrying a manuscript for Jameson, a copy of his preface to an English translation of Cuvier's book. I was to give it to Cuvier for his approval. That was stolen too. And there were the fossil specimens I was supposed to give to him. Worth a fortune.
That's not good, no. You are in trouble.
I think I will have to go home, explain everything to Jameson. I'll be finished, of course. I feel so stupid.
First things first. You're in Paris, after all. Let's get breakfast and some more champagne, and then I will take you to the bureau, if you still want to go.
Yes, I said. I was too tired and hungry to argue. As we walked together to the first tavern, Finn threw information at me at every turn, pointing this way and that. I tried hard to remember at least some of the details, but couldn't move Cuvier from the centre of my vision. The day stretched and tautened, glittered, then darkened, each step a further numbing, a fading of Cuvier's censorious gaze. Somewhere in the cloud of that first day, I saw into a city that even London could not match. They had said it would dazzle me. It did. Card tables, mirrors, roulette, bar after bar, a music hall, a wax museum on the Boulevard du Temple, with effigies of the kings and queens of Europe. Women in feathers and lace paled into an oyster feast on the Quai de la Râpée, as Finn and I sat above the water, watching the night boats carry freight up the Seine, listening to the watermen calling out to one another.
On Sundays, Finn said, the watermen have their own show on the river in front of the Hôtel de Ville. They dive from high platforms and do triple twists. Then they have fireworks. If you sit here, you can watch them for free. It's spectacular.
I won't be here on Sunday, I said. I'll be heading home.
Nonsense, my friend. You give up far too easily. What happened to you? It wasn't your fault. You just have to go and speak to Cuvier, straighten it out.
And then wait to be hung, drawn, and quartered. No thanks. I need sleep now, I said, suddenly overwhelmed. You've wiped me out. I've had far too much to drink.
You're going to need more stamina than that, if we're going to share rooms.
Share rooms?
Well, there's lodgings up for rent on the top floor of the hotel next door. 20 francs a month. A bargain. Much cheaper than the Hotel Cornet. We can move in a week, once you've sorted things out.
Let me think about it. But before that, I must go to the bureau, first thing in the morning.
Oh yes, the bureau. Always the bureau. Well, if you're lucky, you might meet the infamous Jagot. He runs the bureau, and that really would be worth something. He's at the center of everything here in Paris. He has spies all over the city. If anyone is going to tell you how to find your thief, he will.
Jagot.
Henri Jagot. Poacher turned gamekeeper. He's famous across Europe. He was one of the most successful thieves in France until 10 years ago. One of only 3 or 4 people to have escaped the prison at Toulon. They say he's modelled his surveillance methods on Napoleon's secret police.
A thief runs the bureau. How can that be?
Ex-thief. The chief of police offered him a deal. Jagot gave them information. They gave him his freedom and police protection. He's brutal, they say, unstoppable and ambitious. But he's good. He won't be interested in you, though.
Why not?
Because he works on commission, of course. The price on your thief's head won't be big enough. But you must go anyway. File that report. You won't rest until you do.
Inside the offices of the Palais de Justice on the Ile de la Cité the next morning, I found a long line of people sitting on chairs in a windowless corridor with scuffed blue walls and highly polished floors. When my turn arrived and I had answered all his questions, the clerk gave me a numbered ticket and gestured towards a chair. 2 hours I waited, and it seemed I was one of the lucky ones. "Monsieur Jagot will see you himself, Monsieur Connor," the clerk whispered, stooping to speak to me as quietly as he could. He looked impressed. "Monsieur Jagot has taken an interest in your case. His room is the last door on the right, at the end of the corridor." Jagot's clothes were too small for his large frame. Thick-set and powerfully muscular, though perhaps no more than about 5'6" tall, his face was red, sweaty and swollen, his hair dry and unkempt, his chin unshaven. But what I remember most about Jagot were those eyes of his, powerfully dissecting eyes of ice blue. I never saw a single glimpse of kindness or empathy there, not even curiosity, just a relentlessly assessing stare, as if he were perpetually translating your features into notes for his files. Jagot shook my hand without smiling, and gestured for me to take the chair opposite him.
"Welcome to Paris, Monsieur Connor. You have had, my clerk tells me, some objects stolen. A woman, at night, travelling alone."
"Yes, that's it. I need to get my papers and packages back quickly," I said. "It's very important." Jagot sat back in his chair and placed his hands together on the desk in front of him, interlocking his large fingers, scrutinizing me, taking his time.
"Your stolen objects interest me, Monsieur Connor. The specimens, what were these things?"
I concentrated hard to remember the words in French. "I think you would say, 3 fossiles rares et l'eau d'un mammouth." He wrote this down.
"Did you see your thief, Monsieur Connor?"
"Yes, but it was dark. She was sitting next to me. I fell asleep."
"Did anyone else see her? The other passengers?"
"No, we were the only 2 people in the outside seats of the mail coach. The other passengers were inside, except for the child she carried."
"Yes, tell me, monsieur, about the child. This was the woman's child, yes? Her daughter?"
"I assumed so. They looked very much alike. I told him as much as I could, in as much detail as I could. She talked about unusual things. She seemed to know more than most women would. He leaned forward. "Monsieur Connor, I tell you something. The woman you describe, who steals from you, the woman who is tall and beautiful, with the skin that is dark, the hair and eyes black, the woman who is a savant, and who steals your mammoth bone and your rare fossils, that woman, she goes by the name of Lucienne Bernard. She has other names, too. She was once the lover of a clever Parisian locksmith called Léon Dufour. This woman you describe, and the man she works with now, the man they call David Silveira, are on a special list that I keep. With these people, I have unfinished business." "But what would such a woman want with my things?" I asked. "I don't understand." He closed his ledger. "We are finished for now, monsieur. There is nothing more for us to do. But you must understand one thing. If you see Madame Bernard again, you will come back here immediately, you understand? And you will ask for me personally. Will you give me your word?" I nodded, reassured. When I left the offices of the Bureau de la Sûreté, I was followed by a man in a long, shabby coat who appeared to have only one arm. That afternoon I walked to the Louvre. Since entry was free to foreign visitors, I could spend an afternoon there and then come to a decision about what to do next. I couldn't see Jago's man anymore, but I knew he was probably still out there somewhere. I followed the crowds through to the Classical Gallery, where I stopped in front of the marble sculpture of Laocoon, the Greek priest and his sons being attacked by sea snakes. I was trying to remember the names of the sinews in Laocoon's raised arm when I sensed her, the rustle of her skirt, the smell of her perfume. I felt her hand on my arm and turned my head a fraction. My thief, in daylight, dressed in pale blue satin. She was standing next to me. If I was angry almost beyond words in that moment of recognition, especially now that I knew I had been the innocent prey of a practiced thief, I was determined not to show it. I kept my wits about me, focusing on only one thing: the return of the stolen objects, the rare fossils and the manuscript. "You have no idea how relieved I am to see you, madame," I said, turning to face her, each phrase tumbling over the next. "Of course, your bag and my bag, they were next to each other amongst the luggage, and it was dark, and you were in a hurry, perhaps. It was an easy mistake to make. Anyone might have—" "I saw you sitting by the Seine," she said, "and I followed you in here." That gravelly voice of hers, the slow, seductive way she spoke. At the Bureau de Sûreté, Henri Jagot had called her Lucienne Bernard. She looked like no thief I had ever imagined. I looked around for Jagot's man, but could only see visitors looking at the sculptures. I felt a hot rush to my head. Until we were closer to the guard, the best thing to do was to keep her talking. "You took my papers, packages and cases from the mail coach," I said slowly, still trying to prompt a conversation that would lead to a restoration of my belongings. "Can we go and get them? I need them, you see. They're very important. Without them—" "You've shaved," she said, smiling. "You look different in daylight. Younger." I put my hand to my jaw, feeling the roughness of the new growth. "My shaving mirror's too small. I cut myself this morning." She began to walk around a marble sculpture slowly, looking at it, not at me. I followed her. "My things?" I struggled to control the panic in my voice. "You look tired," she said softly, stopping to look at me. "Please," I said, my words sharpening, "don't play games with me. It's not fair." She saw me glance towards the guard. We were both waiting for me to do something. Her black eyes, now very close, glittered. Was she daring me? "And if I refuse to return them?" she said, leaning up against a marble pillar. "What then?" "I have money," I said. She laughed. "I don't want your money." I watched the guard begin his walk down the gallery. "I'm going to have you arrested," I said, grabbing her arm. "I shall call the guard." "And what will you say to the guard? How will you prove I am the woman you saw in the dark on the mail coach?" "I will deny it, of course. My French is better than yours, and I have excellent identity papers." "I will take you myself to the Bureau de la Sûreté." "Take me?" Her black eyes flashed. "Do you think you can force me to go anywhere and not be stopped? If I call out, people will be concerned for my safety. It is quite a distance from here to the Île de la Cité." She had paralyzed me a second time, I thought, like a wasp with its prey. I let go of her arm. I had stepped into a spell, across a threshold. Curiosity had prevented me from calling out when I first saw her, and the delay had been critical. I began to plead like a child. "Yes, yes, I will give them back to you," she said. "But I must go now. I will keep your papers and your bones for the moment. Then, in a few days, I will come and find you and explain. Wait for me, Daniel Connor. I will bring your things back. I promise you that." And I let her walk away. Some unaccountable instinct made me trust her. I watched her disappear down into the city, back into the shadows. The following day, the concierge brought me a package that had been delivered to the hotel that morning. Inside, an unsigned note said only, "I have been called away. I will write again in a few days. Wait for me." She knew where I lived then. The package also contained an ornate shaving mirror, considerably bigger than my own, and a copy of Rousseau's Confessions. I bought myself a little time that day, sending Professor Cuvier a short formal letter, pleading illness to explain the delay. I told him that, as a consequence of my illness, about which I was vague, a short period of convalescence would be necessary before I took up my position. I petitioned his tolerance. I would, I promised, be with him by the last week in August. On the 29th of July, 6 days after I had arrived in Paris, Finn and I moved into the new lodgings on the top floor of the hotel next door, where, beyond the pigeons who occupied the window ledge, you could see the turrets of Notre Dame. I read every morning, studying and taking notes from books borrowed for me by Finn's friends from the library in the Jardin des Plantes, so that when the papers and parcels had been returned, I would be ready to engage in informed conversation with Baron Cuvier. And in the afternoons, in the cafes along the left bank, I read Lucien Bernard's copy of Rousseau's Confessions. Her penciled annotations hung around the margins of every page. Several of the anatomy students Finn brought back to our rooms at night were students of Lamarck, the transformist professor at the Jardin des Plantes. Simple forms of life, Lamarck claimed, were being created continuously, all the time, by spontaneous generation. Spores, germs, flecks, maggots crawling out of mud or soil or pond water. Over thousands or millions of years, as they adapted to their changing habitats, these simple organisms became complex animals. Everything was improving, Lamarck claimed, striving towards perfection. And for Finn's friends, this meant that the principles of the revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, and the overturning of the authority of the priests and the kings, were enshrined in nature's laws. In his mockery of Lamarck's ideas, Cuvier was maintaining the status quo, they said, reinforcing the old values. In stressing that animal species were hierarchical and fixed, he was really saying everyone had his place in society, and should stay there. Politically, they were absolutely opposed ways of seeing. I had overheard fragments of conversations about transformism in the coffee-houses and taverns of Edinburgh, where the medical students talked politics. Most of us had read that chapter in Erasmus Darwin's Zoonomia, in which he claimed that species had started out as aquatic filaments, But Erasmus Darwin was mostly ridiculed by the students in Edinburgh. There was a whole set of jokes about whether we had descended from cabbages or oysters. Finn's friends talked openly about transformism, as if the hypothesis was beyond question. These heretics and infidels now fascinated me. Jacot's one-armed man in his dirty coat came and went. Sometimes I glimpsed him at the corner of the street when I left the house in the mornings. Sometimes when I looked down on the street at night, I could see the grey shape of him in the alleyway opposite. Then, on the 4th of August, I received a letter from Monsieur Jacot, written in a fine sloping hand, asking me to meet him at the Jardin des Plantes at 3 o'clock the following day. "Daniel into the lion's den," she'd said. I remembered that remark of hers, as I stood just inside the main gate, looking down the straight, sand-coloured paths, through the classically arranged flower beds, a series of lines that ran all the way to the Museum of Zoology ahead of me, its yellow stone flushed with pink in the afternoon light. I found Jacot sitting in the palm glass house. He had taken off his jacket and had fallen asleep, his hands tucked behind his head. When my shadow fell across his face, his eyes snapped open. "Monsieur Jacot, you have recovered my things?" I asked immediately, shaking his hand. "No, monsieur," he said, stretching and yawning. "I'm sorry to say I have not. But I have other news. Certain information has come to me." "About what?" "About you, monsieur. About your comings and goings. Also about Madame Bernard. She has been asking questions about you. I have reports." He opened up a notebook. "Can you help me to explain that? Have you seen her again?" "No, monsieur. I have no idea why she has taken an interest in me. And I really can't be sure that the wretched woman I spoke to on the mail coach is the same woman you are looking for. It might be a mistake," I said quickly, remembering the shadowy and tentative allegiance I had made to Lucien Bernard in the Louvre. Jacot sighed. "Sometimes these investigations take a long time. My men, they get impatient. They like results. They like the files to close. They like rewards. Impatient men are difficult to control." He paused, nodding towards the end of the path. The one-armed man stood there leaning against the glass. "Have you anything to tell me, Monsieur Connor? Something perhaps you might have forgotten?" "I have seen her only once," I stammered, understanding the threat implicit in his words. "Yes," he said. "I know that. You saw her at 3:30 on the afternoon of the 23rd of July. In the Louvre, I understand. I looked for your report of that meeting in my file, Monsieur Connor, yesterday, but I did not find it. Perhaps I did not look carefully enough. I didn't think it was— Let us say that your report has gone missing. We will call it a bureaucratic error. We will say it is not important. Of course, the next report you write for the Bureau will not go missing. And now, Monsieur Connor, I must ask for your identity papers. Your passport?" "My passport, Monsieur Jacot? Why do you need my passport?" I reached into my jacket pocket. "We have rules in Paris, monsieur, and those rules say that a man or woman who is part of a police investigation cannot leave the city. Your papers will be safe with me, Monsieur Connor. You have my word." "For how long? I mean to return to England."
"Until we know what is what. And how long does that take? Who is to say? Of course, if we find Madame Bernard, or if someone brings her to us, then we close the files. You may go now, monsieur, but you must not speak of our meeting. Not to anyone, you understand?" I stood up. "Monsieur Jacot," I began to remonstrate. "Au revoir, Monsieur Connor." When I saw Lucien Bernard for the 3rd time, it was the night of the 10th of August, in the crypt of a former convent near the Place Vendôme.
Finn had taken me to the Phantasmagorie. A Belgian illusionist named Etienne Gaspard Robertson had built a theatre inside the crypt as a tourist attraction. They called it the Theatre of the Dead. I protested, but I went. It was in the midst of the incessant flickering of smoky lights, with spirit illusions lunging across our heads, that for a moment, just for a second or two, I saw Lucienne Bernard, her head amongst the other heads in the audience, only 3 or 4 rows away. Her face, lit briefly by the glare of the lamps, stared back at me, her eyes dark. I saw surprised recognition on her face, then alarm, even perhaps fear. But though I stood to try to find my way to her, stumbling among the seats, Etienne Gaspard Robertson extinguished the lights, and when he lit them again to illuminate the next spectacle, Lucienne had gone, her seat empty. A few days later, Jagot climbed out of a fiacre outside our lodgings just as I was leaving. "I need to ask you a few questions, Monsieur Connor. You will come with me a little way, perhaps," he said, opening the door to the carriage. I climbed in reluctantly, fearful for my safety. "You are in Paris for 3 weeks now, Monsieur Connor. You move in interesting circles. You have seen Madame Bernard?" He looked closely at me as I answered, "No, monsieur, I have not." I was not sure of what I had really seen amongst the shadows and the spectres of the Phantasmagorie. "You have heard the name Silvera spoken by any of your new friends?" "Silvera? No, monsieur." "It seems that he too is back in Paris." "With respect, Monsieur Jagot, what has this Silvera to do with me?" "Monsieur Silvera is a very dangerous man. He is the banker for the Society of 10,000. I had him in my hand 5 years ago, but he disappeared." "Society of 10,000? "The Society of 10,000 is the thief aristocracy of Paris, Monsieur Connor. These rich men and women take on a job only if it is worth more than 10,000 francs. Silveira is Portuguese, a dealer in diamonds. They call him Trompe la Mort, the man who cheats death." "I still don't understand why this has anything to do with me." "David Silveira, Monsieur Connor, is a friend of Lucienne Bernard. Lucienne Bernard is a friend of David Silveira. If I have one, I have both, you understand. And Lucienne Bernard is a friend of Daniel Connor. Or perhaps Daniel Connor is the accomplice of Lucienne Bernard." "Accomplice? That woman stole from me. How can you possibly think I'm her accomplice?" Jagot thumped on the roof of the fiacre twice, and we came to a stop. "In Paris, everyone is someone else. You see that man there? The one in black? Oui, that is Pierre Coignard, jewel thief. I shared a cell with him in the prison at Toulon in '88. He was climbing out of the fiacre. "Excuse me, Monsieur Connor. I must speak with Monsieur Coignard. The driver will take you back. Keep listening, Monsieur Connor. And if you hear the name of Silvera spoken, or if you see or speak to the woman Bernard, you come and tell me." But Lucienne Bernard did not appear, and 5 days later, on waking after a troubled night, my money almost gone, I resolved to go back to Jagot, plead for the restitution of my passport, and return home. I packed my bags carefully, leaving them stacked near the door, and went to find Finn. I found him at the Palais Royal, on the outer row of a crowd of 50 or 60 people who were watching a card game. Through the thicket of standing figures, I could see only fragments of the card players' hands. And then a face I recognized. A half-profile. It was her, Lucienne Bernard. But not her. For she was now a he. I pushed through the spectators to get closer. Yes, it was her, dressed as a man. Green silk frock coat, silver waistcoat, neckerchief arranged artfully around her throat. And no one seemed to notice. She was winning magnificently, judging from the gasps of the crowd that had gathered in the smoky candlelight. As her fingers, delicately gloved in pale grey, adjusted the coins that had been pushed towards her, she looked up. Her black eyes met mine, and she smiled suddenly with what seemed to me a flush of unguarded pleasure, even relief. As the game finished, and the crowd applauded again, I watched her stand and look for me, preparing, I imagined, yet another escape. But then, as the crowd fell away, she walked slowly but directly towards me, looking slightly nervous, her brow furrowed. "Don't give me away," she whispered. "Jacques man is here. I have seen him, but he hasn't recognized me." "Where have you been?" I muttered. "Where have you been?" she said, virtually dragging me into a window seat in an alcove and drawing a red velvet curtain across to shield us. "I sent letters. I called, but the concierge said you had left the hotel. I looked for you in the jardin at the lectures." "But you were at the Phantasmagorie that night. You saw me. You could have spoken to me then." "Jacques man was sitting right behind you. I had to take the back staircase out through the crypt. Listen, Daniel, I want to give you back your things. Taking them was a stupid idea. I regretted it as soon as I thought about the price you would have to pay for losing them. Meet me in the alley that runs off the Passage des Petits Pères at 7 o'clock, under the third lamp from the east. And when I leave here, you mustn't follow me, because Jacques man will follow you. Do you understand?" Just before 7, I sat on a wooden crate under the third lamp from the east in the Passage des Petits Pères. When a street door opened and she came out, something broke inside me. I pushed her up against the wall, unconscious of anything except the need to prevent her from disappearing again. "Everything," I said, "is ruined. I have no money, no job, and no prospects." "Monsieur Connor, you are hurting me." "You've destroyed everything for me." But I let her go all the same. She brushed her hands along her shoulders, smoothing down the folds of her jacket. "I know who you are," I said clumsily, "and what you do. I know all about you." Afraid she would slip away again, I lunged towards her but stumbled, falling against her, pushing her hard. She fell towards the wall, tripping over some boxes and hitting her shoulder. Then, regaining her balance, she turned, stepped towards me, and hit me across the face with her fist. "You know nothing. You are blind," she said, rubbing her hand. "As blind as it is possible to be, monsieur. You have no idea. You see nothing beyond yourself." I closed my eyes and watched small pinpricks of light puncturing the darkness. Her voice softened. "Keep your eyes closed," she said, moving closer to me, placing one hand gently on the back of my neck. "Now tell me what color you see when I do this." I saw blue when she kissed me, there in the darkening alley. "Blue," she said when I answered her. "I see purple." She unlocked the door in the wall and led me into a courtyard. We climbed the stairs to the second floor in the dusty half-light. A small painted sign on the wall read, "Serrurier, locksmith." Jacques had said that Lucien had a friend who was a locksmith called Dufour, Léon Dufour. He had said they were lovers. We stepped into a dark room lined with shelves and all the paraphernalia of a locksmith's art. "The locksmith, Dufour," I said. "Is he here?" "Dufour is dead. He left me all of this, so sometimes I am Dufour, the locksmith." She gestured at her clothes. "Tomorrow I am a linen dealer, or a botanical illustrator, or a printer's assistant. In Paris I am many people. Dressed like this, I can come and go as I please." I was not prepared for what came next. Behind the room of locks and keys and dust was another room. It might have been a cave beneath the sea. The last of the evening light fell onto shelves covered with spiraled shells, the intricate branchings of red corals, and the fan shapes of sponges. Shelves covered every wall, and, in the centre, cabinets with drawers of different lengths and widths stood among packing cases, from which dried seaweed spilled out. "My specimens," I muttered. "They're here. You stole them for this. A collection." "Most of them are the remains of my grandmother's collection. She left it to me when she died. Some are from the Red Sea, others are new. All of them are rare and worth a great deal of money. Some, yes," she said with a smile, "have been acquired, stolen." "Why, though?" I asked. "Why did you go to such trouble?" "My grandmother collected corals because she loved rare and exotic things. It's different for me. My interest is philosophical. The corals know things we do not know." "What do you mean, know? They don't have minds or eyes or souls. They can't know anything." "They know how old the earth is. They know how life on earth began. Perhaps they can't tell us, but we can read them like we read a book or a clock, and find out." I nodded towards the packing cases, almost afraid to ask the question. "You were going then? Leaving Paris?" "I came back to move my collection, to take everything back to Italy. Nothing is safe here now that Paris is occupied." "Italy?" I said, my voice shaking. "You're going to Italy?" "Yes, that's where I live." "The child," I said. "Delphine?" "She is staying at a convent on the north side of the city. The nuns run it as a school. It's not safe for her to be here with me in the atelier. I see her almost every day. She's not far away." The heat in the room was stifling. I eased off my jacket. When she stepped towards me and kissed me again, I felt an unbearable longing, softer and darker than the seabed. "You know, you were lucky to see the paintings in the Louvre when you did. The Louvre walls are full of gaps now. The Prussians took their paintings back 2 weeks ago, and Wellington sent 150 riflemen in today to reclaim the Italian paintings." I followed her through a low door into a room that was empty, except for a mattress on a rugless floor, covered in crumpled sheets, and a pale blue silk nightdress. "I can stay in Paris. If you return my things, you could stay too, perhaps." For a second I wondered whether I should warn her about my conversations with Jago. Tell her that there seemed to be a high price on her head, but when she pulled her shirt over her head, and her hair came loose from its ribbon, catching the light from the candles, I forgot about that. "Wellington has told the Venetians they can have their horses back." "He has?" I tried to keep my mind on the empty white spaces on the walls of the Louvre, as she took off my shirt and slipped the belt from my waist. "The horses? What horses?" "The 4 bronze horses that Napoleon took from St. Mark's Square and put on the top of the Arc de Triomphe." She lowered herself onto the mattress, pulling me down beside her. "The horses coming down," she whispered. "That will be something to see." Lying on her side, facing me, her head propped on her hand, she traced the lines of my thigh and hip with her fingers. "I see purple now," I said, my eyes closed. I pressed my mouth to hers, my hand on her breast underneath the sheet. "Paris will never be like this again," she said. "It's all changing. You will be here to see it all, even when I am gone. You will see everything." "Stay a few more days. I want to see you again. I want—" "What does Daniel Connor want?" she asked, half asleep, It's dangerous for me in Paris. You keep forgetting. I have forgotten everything outside this room, I said, running my fingers through her hair, reminding myself that she was no apparition. There is nothing outside. There is only Jagot, she said. He is always there. He doesn't forget. What can Jagot want with you? It was a bad mistake. There was a gunfight in an old warehouse in Montmartre 6 years ago. One of Jagot's men died. Did you kill him, Jagot's man? No, I didn't. But Jagot arrested me and some other people. It was mistaken identities, you understand. So he wants revenge? Yes. 4 of us escaped, but my friend Dufour, he did not escape, and was sent to the prison at Toulon. Jagot never sleeps, and he never stops looking. Eventually he will find me, even in Italy. You are a beautiful boy, Daniel Connor, but even for your beauty and cleverness, I cannot stay in Paris. Just stay to see the Venetian horses come down from the Arc de Triomphe, I said. It will only be a few more days. And so it began. I traded the coral fossils that morning for 5 of her days, taking only the mammoth bone, the manuscript, and the notebooks from her atelier. A few hours later, I stepped out into the rain, as if into a new time, a new air. I'd find a way of explaining the disappearance of the corals, I thought. I would tell Cuvier that they had been delayed in London and would arrive later in the year. I had become reckless. 2 days later, I found Lucienne sitting on the steps of the Louvre, reading a newspaper, waiting for me. That day, she was a tall woman dressed as a man, in a slightly worn grey-green coat. This masquerade of hers was carefully put together, I thought, so that she would not stand out. Imagine the crowds there must have been here in the square, she said, pointing to where the 4 bronze horses made black, muscular shapes against the sky on top of the Arc de Triomphe. It's 17 years since they brought the horses to Paris, on carts, in a long procession. You saw it? No. I was in Egypt. I read about it in the French papers there. You went to Egypt? I heard the incredulity in my voice, my own boyish awe and envy. In Napoleon's campaign? Napoleon had taken savants with him to Egypt. Archaeologists, botanists, astronomers, doctors, and engineers. He took them with him so that they might study Egypt and bring back ancient knowledge to France. At the end of July 1798, I went out as one of Professor Geoffroy's assistants. They made us wear uniforms. It was incredibly hot. They made women wear uniforms. I went as a man, of course, she said, laughing. I wondered what we must look like, 2 men sitting together under the Arc de Triomphe looking up. We must have looked like brothers or friends, but we were lovers. I wanted to touch her again. Where is Jagot's man today? She asked suddenly, looking up and down the street. He's gone. I lost him. No one loses one of Jagot's men. Trust me. Jagot must have called off his surveillance for some reason. I wonder what that means. She hesitated, calculating. What will you do now that you have your things back? I've written to Cuvier and sent him the letters from Professor Jameson. He wrote back yesterday. It was easy. I have an appointment with him at 3 o'clock on Monday, and then on Tuesday I start work. Bon, she said. That's very good. He's writing a catalogue of the whole animal kingdom, which will include a description of every species in the world. And by the time you begin your work with Cuvier, I will be back in my study in Italy, amongst my books and papers. Stay in Paris till the end of the summer, I said. Jagot has too much to do and too few men. You are not in danger now. And Lucienne smiled that slow smile of hers that said she knew better, but she promised to stay just a little longer. And so I finally began work as an aide naturaliste to Professor Cuvier in the library of the Museum of Comparative Anatomy in the Jardin des Plantes. There were 10 of us working that summer on the bird volume of Cuvier's catalogue, his Règne Animal, and we were all under pressure to perform. I began to work longer hours than the other assistants. Despite my impatience to see Lucienne, I was often the last to leave. Not long after I began work at the Jardin, and when I had complained that I knew nothing of her friends, Lucienne took me to a café in Saint-Germain-des-Prés and introduced me to Manon Laforge and Alain Saint-Vincent, who were playing cards in an alcove behind a curtain. "Well, well," Alain said, tucking his cards into his top pocket and reaching over to shake my hand. "One of Cuvier's protégés. That's one for the books." Alain Saint-Vincent smoked too many cigars and drank too much whiskey. He had a cough that sounded painful. He had been exiled from France for speaking out against the king. He was supposed to be in hiding, but he did not seem to know how to hide or to make himself invisible. Manon Laforge was short, slim and muscular. Her black hair was cut short. Manon didn't like me much. She didn't trust me, and she didn't like that Lucienne trusted me. "How old are you, Monsieur Connor? 14, 15? Saint-Vincent asked. I refused to rise to the provocation. 23, I said, exaggerating a little. 23? You don't get much younger than that. Or prettier." Manon kept her eyes fixed on Lucienne, who looked nervous, edgy. "David," Lucienne asked, "have you found him? Have you asked at the curiosity dealers?" "Not yet," Manon said. "He'll find us before we find him. Did you read about Coignard? They found his body in the Seine yesterday morning. He'd been tortured, and his hands and feet had been cut off. People are saying it was Jagot, an old score. They say Coignard was supposed to be a lesson to the others on the list. Lucienne, we have to leave Paris." "I know," she said. "I know, we will. We will be long gone before he catches up with us." Once I had adjusted to the life of the museum, I took great pleasure in my work, especially when, after 2 or 3 weeks, Cuvier began to give me special assignments, because he said I was quick and my drawings were accurate. Cuvier's praise of my work sometimes made things difficult for me with the other assistants. The pressure rose in the weeks leading up to the Dutch ambassador's expected arrival in Paris. Sebald Justinus Broekmans, they said, was going to take a large number of the stuffed birds and skeletons we were working with back to Holland. We all now benefited from any special accuracy or efficiency, as Cuvier's temper and impatience climbed by the day. Meanwhile, after several weeks in which Jagot's man had not appeared, Lucienne was becoming increasingly reckless. Certain that the success of her disguise was the reason Jagot had called off the surveillance, she continued to dress as a man outside the atelier, and even came to meet me at the Jardin. "My grandmother had a garden in Marseille," she said. "I spent my summers there." Inside the house, her grandmother's collection of shells, fossils and corals filled most of the downstairs rooms, so that there was never anywhere to sit. During the Revolution, the collection was requisitioned for the Republic, she told me, for the enlightenment of the French people. Cuvier had made a list of the important natural history collections in the great houses of France, and handed it to Napoleon. "And your family?" I hardly dared ask. I knew something of what had happened to wealthy families such as Lucienne's. "It was 1794. I came to Paris to find them, my parents and my grandmother. I was your age. I saw things no one should ever see. People called it le terroir, the terror. It was a massacre." "The guillotine?" I asked. "Yes, there was the guillotine, but what happened in the streets was worse. People with pickaxes, kitchen knives, scythes. I saw one woman and a child cut to pieces limb by limb, trying to crawl to each other. I still see them in my dreams." Below us, the Jardin stretched away in avenues of lime trees, flanked by neatly bordered rows of flowers and small shrubs. Beyond the garden, the Seine made a horizontal line of blue before the city rose again, all spires and domes and towers on the north bank. "I wish we were inside," I said. "I wish we were in your bed. Do you know how much I think about you?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "Yes, I know that. I remember how that feels. I don't want you to remember it. I want you to feel exactly as I do. I'm older than you. Love changes its shape. It doesn't hurt so much. It's better. Softer." She seemed distracted, as though she was trying to recall something. "What are you thinking about?" "When I was in Egypt, there was a man, a trader in corals, who taught me how to dive in the Red Sea." "You swam in the Red Sea with him?" I asked, before I could find a way of saying it differently. "Are you jealous?" "I don't know," I said, embarrassed. "I think I'm more jealous of you, of your life, of everything you've done, the places you've been. And yes, I am jealous of that man, the Portuguese man." "David, yes," she said, her face darkening. "I've been looking for him, but everyone is in hiding in Paris. I was hoping Saint Vincent might know where Silvera is, but he doesn't." "Silvera?" I said slowly. "Yes, David Silvera, the man I travelled with in Egypt." Silvera. This was the man Jagot called Trompe la Mort, the man who defied death. We sat there for a long time overlooking the jardin. "Look, Lucienne, surely if it is a case of mistaken identity, you could go to Jagot and explain it, and then you would be free to come and go as you wish." "There are no mistaken identities, Daniel. And there is no being free. Not anymore, not for me. I steal, I stole, we steal things. You understand? It's what we do, Manon, Saint Vincent and I, and sometimes others when we need them. It's what we've done for 20 years. It has paid for everything. My work on corals, the house in Italy. After the revolution, the émigrés paid us to take things back from the museums and libraries and galleries. We were good. We made a lot of money. But we stopped 6 years ago after the gunfight when things went wrong. We all left Paris and tried to start our lives again in different places. But Jagot, there was no stopping him. If his man hadn't died, perhaps things might have been different." Now I understood the presence of the antique dueling pistol I had come across in the atelier only days before. It had been recently cleaned and loaded. Time was suspended in Paris. Rumours circulated. Wellington was afraid that moving the horses would be too much for the French people, that the horses had become a symbol. But the Venetian ambassadors were still in Paris, pressing hard for their return. I was with Lucienne when the bronze horses came down a few days later, caught up in the crowd, all swarming in one direction, towards the Place du Carrousel and the Arc de Triomphe. Journalists from the world's newspapers stood in front of us in the square. Their artists had assembled easels. This was a political performance. Here was proof that Napoleon was not returning. Shielding my eyes from the sun, I could see the first of the 4 horses moving slightly. The crowd gathered around the perimeter of the square groaned and gasped. The bronze horse swung into the air, high above the square. My head swam. I watched pins of light come on across my vision, and then go out. I fainted. When I came to, a crowd had gathered. I looked up to see heads silhouetted against a bright white sky. Lucienne had disappeared, and a man with a voice I recognized was making the crowd disperse. "Ah, Monsieur Connor," Jagot said. "You should be more careful in this sun. You need a hat." "Yes," I mumbled, allowing him to help me to my feet. The sun is hotter than I had realized. I was relieved that Lucien had got away.
My men tell me you are now working in the jardin, he said, and that your things, the papers, the corals and the bones, they have come back to you. It is most unusual, you see, for stolen things to come back in such a way. There is usually a story behind such things. Is there a story, Monsieur Connor?
There is no story, I said quickly, wondering what else Jagot's men might have told him, what else they might have seen. It was just a mistake, I lied. It wasn't a theft after all. My travel bag had been taken by another passenger, a man, not by the woman I described to you. He, the other passenger, tracked me down and returned my things, all of them. My hands had begun to shake. I put them into my pockets.
Good. That is good news, monsieur. So, you must come and give me the name and the address of the passenger who took your bag by mistake, because that person might be able to tell me something about the woman you described seeing on the mail coach, the savant, Lucien Bernard. I will send a man to your lodgings to take details. Perhaps I will even come myself. Good afternoon, Monsieur Connor. Remember, you must buy a hat for this sun. À bientôt.
He slipped away into the crowd. Now I wondered if Jagot's apparent disappearance for almost a month had been engineered to make me, us, feel complacent. I thought of what Manon had said about Coignard's tortured body being found in the Seine. I had to get Lucien out of Paris. The net was closing in. For Professor Cuvier, the hands of the clock seemed to be moving faster than usual. The Dutch professor of medicine and chemistry, Monsieur Sebald Justinus Broekmans, was on the road to Paris, sent on ambassadorial duties to reclaim the world-famous collection of the Dutch stadtholder, requisitioned by Napoleon when he captured Holland. It had been transported to Paris in 222 cases, filled with rare books, specimens, scientific instruments, rocks, and the complete skeletons of a 15-foot giraffe, an orangutan, and a hippopotamus. Baron Cuvier, sleepless, paced his studio, trying to think of what terms he could offer Broekmans, trying to think of ways to persuade the Dutch professor and Wellington that those objects must stay in the jardin. What he knew all too well was that without the Dutch collection, he would be nothing. In his house on the Quai Voltaire, the director of the Louvre, Vivant Denon, the man who had personally drawn up the list of artifacts to be taken from the great museums and galleries of Europe, was overseeing his men who were packing up a series of valuable paintings and objects. Time was running out for Denon. That day, Wellington had asked him to account for a series of objects listed as stolen that were still unaccounted for. Unaccounted for because Denon had made them disappear from the Louvre into his own cellar. A Caravaggio painting, Egyptian artifacts, a Titian drawing, and a 16th-century cabinet of curiosities called the Montserrat Cabinet. And now that Wellington was coming to his house, these objects needed to disappear even deeper into Paris.
"Delphine has asked to see you, Monsieur Connor,"
Lucien said the following morning, a Sunday, when I finally woke and went to find her writing at the table amongst the corals, in her blue silk dressing gown.
"Would you like to visit her with me?"
Of course, I said. This was the day I had resolved to urge Lucien's departure. Although I had tried several times the night before, she had changed the subject, and now I was wary of telling her about the conversations I had had with Jagot, the accusations and the threats. "Lucien," I began, "you must be especially careful. I think Jagot may be closer than you think."
"Jagot won't move yet. He can't. He's waiting. Manon is going to take Delphine back to Italy, and I will follow next week."
She was wrapping a long, narrow object in brown paper and tying it with string.
"I have an errand to run, and I want to show you a new place that won't be in your guidebook."
We twisted and turned, following side streets, weaving in and out, around construction sites and piles of rubbish. Lucienne finally stopped at a small sign on the wall of a house in the Rue de Picpus. It read, "Women of the Sacred Heart." A nun appeared at the door, and, recognizing Lucienne, she led us through dark, cool corridors to a cobbled courtyard, where she brought us glasses of lemonade, and gestured to us to take a seat at the garden table. A few minutes later, Delphine appeared. As soon as her eyes adjusted to the sunlight, and she saw Lucienne sitting at the other end of the path, she ran towards us and clambered up onto Lucienne's lap. Lucienne began to unpin the child's hair, uncoiling her braids and shaking out her curls, while she spoke in soft Italian and passed her a glass of lemonade. I fell asleep in the sun under the apple trees, watching mother and daughter playing ninepins. When I awoke, Delphine was kneeling over me, her face blocking the sun, dropping small leaves onto me one by one. At a word from her mother, she stood up, smoothed down her dress, and then addressed me in Italian, very properly.
"She says she is glad to know you,"
Lucienne translated.
"that she hopes you will call again."
Delphine embraced her mother and ran back inside for her afternoon sleep.
"Now that you have met Delphine properly," Lucienne said, "I have something else to show you."
At the far end of the courtyard, a gate led into the bright sunshine of a long rectangular garden, a few late white roses blooming between lines of yew and lime trees. We turned through a second gateway into a plot of land that had been walled off from the rest of the garden. There were 3 or 4 new tombs and gravestones, with a few trees casting shade.
"They closed all the religious houses during the Revolution,"
Lucienne said.
"A doctor bought this one and turned it into a private asylum. They brought the mad people here, the ones who were rich enough. In the summer of 1794, whilst the inmates watched, 3 workmen made a hole in the wall over there wide enough for a cart to drive through. They also dug 2 deep trenches in the corner over there. Orders of the Revolutionary Tribunal. A few days later, 3 men drove carts piled high with corpses straight from the guillotine. There were more than 1,000 bodies. The inmates watched over a wall, while the executioner's assistants undressed the bodies, stripping everything from them. Why? That is how the assistants were paid. They could keep anything of value they found on the bodies. It was hot, she said. June. They piled the heads on one side, the bodies on the other. Every now and again, one of the assistants was sick up there against the wall. How do you know this? I just know. I heard. She was following the wall, moving between the new gravestones. It's here. She was peering at a large stone plaque on the wall. Her fingers traced the carvings of a name, one of hundreds. It read, Lucienne de Luc, 23 years, Comtesse. My name, she said. That's my name, Lucienne de Luc. I was a comtesse once, an enemy of the people. There were thousands of us. They moved us from prison to prison. Each building was one step closer to the guillotine. It was like Dante's circles of hell. So, Lucienne Bernard, the infidel thief, had been a countess. I don't understand. How did your name come to be listed here? A woman in the prison took my name. She stole it. Why would anyone do that? I don't know. I didn't know her. I had never spoken to her. Mon Dieu, perhaps she was mad. I can see her now. Her red hair all cut off. She stood up and walked towards them when they called my name, as if she was sleepwalking. I stood up too, but when I saw what was happening, I sat down again, very slowly. I've thought about it ever since. The way I sat down. The way I let her do that. So she went to the guillotine and you didn't? Yes. and her body was stripped and thrown into the pit over there, with the others. Her name was Lucienne Bernard. She wasn't important to the Revolutionary Tribunal, it seems. So thinking I was her, they released me from the prison a few months later. Paris gave me a new name. She paused and steadied herself against the gravestone. Then she began to unwrap the parcel she had carried with her. Another reason I had to come back to Paris one last time. Inside the paper was a long, thin splinter of green slate, on which she had engraved Lucien Bernard's name. At least it's something, she said, as she pushed the slate into the ground near the wall. She wanted to die. I know what that feels like. When you have wanted to die as much as I have, it makes you reckless with your life afterwards. But now there is Delphine, and I try not to be reckless. It is a resolution I made. She smiled sadly. I don't seem to be doing very well. Resolutions, I said. I'm not very good at them either. I kissed her. Don't look at me like that, she said. I don't need your pity. I wanted you to see this garden, that's all. I wanted you to see it with your own eyes. Everyone should see it, so that we remember just how noble the human species really is. When I knocked at the locksmith's atelier 2 days later, answering a note she had sent, Lucienne came to the door wearing her workman trousers, her shirt undone and her feet bare. She seemed tired, and her face was swollen. When I looked more closely, I could see that it was also bruised. What happened? I asked, alarmed. Somebody did this to you, didn't they? Was it just one or several men? When? Where? In the alleyway down there last night. It was just one man. At the other end of the workroom, through the frame of the half-open door, Manon and Saint-Vincent sat at a table in conversation. Lucienne ran her hand through her hair and looked at me as if she was trying to frame a question. Everything is good for you again at the Jardin, yes? Cuvier trusts you. You are doing well there. I wasn't sure what frightened me more, the coldness of her manner, or the menacing implications of this night attack. Yes, I said, lowering my voice. What is this, Lucienne? Somebody has attacked you, and now you want to talk about my work at the museum. You never tell me anything. You treat me as if I'm a boy, as if I'm useless. There is trouble, bad trouble, like a spider's web. You will get caught in it too, and it will get worse. But I need to ask you to help me. She opened a drawer, took out a piece of folded paper, and passed it to me. It's a map of the Jardin des Plantes, an old one. It's of no use to me. It doesn't have any of the new buildings on it. I need to know where everyone in the Jardin lives, and I need a detailed map of Cuvier's museum, including the cellars. And I need the information soon. 3 weeks or sooner. Do you think you can do that? Is it possible? Lucienne's face and posture were utterly impassive now. A man came to see me yesterday, she continued, pacing up and down. Someone I worked with before. He came with a commission, a job, for us. I said to him we don't do that work anymore, but he won't let me leave Paris until we bring him what he wants. He's dangerous. Why didn't you send for me? I didn't need you yesterday. Today I do. I haven't slept worrying about it, about you. This will be a big risk. You could lose everything. But why you? There must be other thieves in Paris, professionals like you who can do what this man wants. You can't be the only one. Yes, but what he wants is in Cuvier's museum. And I know that museum better than any other thief in France. Or at least I used to. He knows that. But what can be worth the trouble? Some old bones, a mummy or two? A diamond. One of the biggest in the world. It belongs to Denon, the director of the Louvre. Denon and Cuvier have made a deal. Cuvier is hiding some of Denon's most valuable pieces in the cellar of the museum. And in return, Denon has promised to help Cuvier negotiate with the Dutch ambassador.
How long do you have?
The end of October. Denon has arranged for his collection to be taken out of the country then, so we have 1 month only. It's almost impossible.
She was dressing now, tucking in her shirt.
You don't know this man, Daniel. If I could find a way out of it, I would. I promised Manon for the sake of Delphine. I said there would be no more commissions. But this time, we cannot choose.
She paused, her eyes full of tears.
Daniel, what if he finds out about her? What if he finds out where Delphine is?
I was struggling now, weighing up the risks. An illustrious future lost, perhaps even prison, against what was at stake, thinking not just of Lucienne and her accomplices, but of Delphine in the convent garden. Just a map? I asked.
Just a map.
I know someone. Joseph Deleuze could draw up a map. He knows the garden and the museum like no one else does. I could try. One of the first things that Manon said that day when Lucienne finished explaining about the map was,
Lucienne, Saint-Vincent's found Silveira. David? Vraiment? He's back in the Rue du Petit Diable. Well, his timing's perfect, huh? It is quite the reunion now.
Saint-Vincent, hearing the flint in Lucienne's voice, changed the subject.
It's impossible. We can't get into the museum again. They have more guards in there now, and a whole set of new locks. We might as well put the chains on our wrists and ankles and go straight to the prison at Toulon.
Manon intervened.
Remember that job in the Rue Saint-Pierre? You cut the glass in 5 seconds and cleaned out in 17. You said that was impossible.
Lucienne turned to them.
We are going to need more money. I need to rent 2 floors of a house overlooking the jardin, and it won't be cheap. We must have equipment and transport. That will cost more money than I have.
Ruben? Manon asked.
No. Ruben's retired.
Who then? Lucienne walked back to the window.
Silveira.
Silveira?
Saint-Vincent turned on her.
Are you mad?
We have no choice. We need him. I'm going to see him.
Start with the pawn shop in the Rue du Petit Diable, said Saint-Vincent. I asked around yesterday. He's not been back long. And take Daniel with you.
Lucienne and I took a narrow street off the Rue Tisserand that led into a maze of more narrow, covered passageways. A small boy with a dirty face and bare feet stood leaning against the wall in the first alley.
"Are you lost, mister? Want some help?"
he said, and grinned.
"No, we know where we are going,"
Lucienne said, passing the boy a coin. "Why don't we get him to take us there?"
"Have you learned nothing in Paris, Daniel? If I asked him to take us, he'll lead us into a cul-de-sac, and then he and his little friends will rob us."
Behind us in the darkness, I heard the boy give a sequence of whistles. A second boy appeared from an alleyway slightly ahead to the right. He was older, perhaps 15. He stood there, legs slightly apart, blocking our path, a wooden bat in one hand. Some smaller boys walked around and in front of us, pushing, babbling. The boy with the bat looked at Lucienne, taking her in. Lucienne looked back at him and touched her middle finger to the spot between her eyebrows. He said something to the younger boys which I couldn't follow. They looked up at Lucienne and then dropped back. Suddenly we were alone in the alley, with only the boy ahead. He touched his finger to the point between his eyes, and then disappeared too, back into the darkness.
"Joachim," she said. "He knows me. He's in charge around here."
On the narrow cobbled Rue du Petit Diable, most of the shop fronts were boarded up, except for a pawn shop that carried a sign saying Ezra Moses, Curiosité et bric-à-brac over the window. Lucienne stopped in front of it. A figure in worn clothing appeared at the door and looked at us both encouragingly.
"Good day, sirs. What is the price of that book?" Lucien asked slowly.
He took the book and examined its flyleaf, saying,
"There is no price, I'm afraid, sir. And the shopkeeper is not in. He has gone to dinner. Will you wait?" "Monsieur Silveyra?" Lucien whispered.
The shop assistant kept his eyes on Lucien in rather too studied a way.
"What makes you think you will find him here, monsieur? This shop belongs to Ezra Moses." "Will you tell Monsieur Moses," Lucien said, "when he returns from his dinner, that Monsieur Dufour has called and would like to see Monsieur Silveyra?" "You had better step inside, Monsieur Dufour. I will take your message to Monsieur Moses and bring you a reply in an instant."
Inside the shop, which smelled of dust, damp, and great age, the lamps were turned down low, casting distorted shapes against dirty purple walls. A few minutes later he returned.
"You can go up. Top of the stairs. First door to the right."
Behind the red velvet curtain that hung across part of the doorway, I could see a man, unshaven and brooding, sitting at a long oak desk.
"Silveyra."
Lucien's voice established a tone, a distance.
"Lucien,"
Silveyra said. He did not stand or even smile. His eyes narrowed.
"Who is the boy?"
"What boy?"
I shifted awkwardly. Lucien turned and remembered me.
"Daniel Connor,"
she said.
"One of yours?"
"Yes."
As she stepped into the room, I took several steps towards Silveyra and held out my hand across the desk. He shook it without much enthusiasm.
"Take a seat, boy. Over there by the window. Here, finish off these."
He got up and placed a small terracotta dish on the mahogany table by the window seat and passed me a fork. I did not like being called a boy.
"Quails,"
he said, gesturing at the dish.
"They are good, but you can't buy good ginger in Paris anymore. They need more ginger. Fresh."
"I had forgotten that," Lucien said.
"What?"
"Your obsession with food."
Something indefinable passed between the two of them, an atmosphere, an intimacy, a history as pungent as ginger.
"You have a commission, Lucien."
"How do you know that?"
"I think you must have a good reason to come back to Paris. And if you have a commission, you need money. That is why you come to me. C'est vrai?"
"C'est vrai."
"So what is it this time?"
"The museum in the Jardin."
"Again? You can't go back in there."
"So people keep telling me."
"It would be easier for you to break into the Banque Nationale. And what could Cuvier have left in there that you could possibly want? You must have all the corals now."
"What do you know about the Satar diamond?"
Silveyra laughed and tipped his head back.
"Someone has told you a bad story, my friend. The Satar is a myth invented by the East India Company."
"Denon has it."
I watched Lucienne with rising admiration. Her pacing was impeccable.
"In Paris?"
"Yes, in the Montserrat cabinet."
"The cabinets in Paris?"
"Your informers are slipping, Silveyra. The diamond's been in Paris for 10 years in Denon's collection in the Quai Voltaire, hidden inside an Egyptian sarcophagus. But 2 weeks ago it was placed in the vaults of Cuvier's museum in the Jardin, inside the Montserrat cabinet. Denon asked Cuvier to hide it for him."
"Mon Dieu, you are being truthful with me?"
"Yes."
"Will you give me exclusive trading rights?"
"Yes,"
Lucienne said.
"Absolutely."
"I have a condition. I want to go in there with you this time. The museum. Let's get it right this time. No mistakes."
It was that day in the velveted room above the shop in the Rue du Pet au Diable that something else began to shadow the longing that I felt for her. The French call it la jalousie. As if something had passed for a second over the sun, the realization had come to me as soon as I had seen Silvera's face, that he, Silvera, not the poet-locksmith Dufour, who died in Toulon, was Delphine's father. The first week of October circled into the second week, as I waited for Deleuze to bring me the final drawing of the map. A couple of weeks before, I had said to old man Deleuze in the coffee house in the Jardin, "You know this place better than anyone. You really ought to write a history of it." When he didn't answer, I began to flatter him. "No one knows more about the Jardin than you do. And Cuvier's not going to live forever, is he? What will happen then?" I remember hesitating, ashamed by how easy it was to reel him in. I could hear myself flattering and cajoling, but then I reminded myself what was at stake. "Of course," I said, "it would be a monument. It will be read in libraries in hundreds of years by students of science who will ask, how did they do that? How did those French men of science build one of the greatest museums in the world? You could start by drawing a map of the whole Jardin," I suggested.
But that would take a long time. You can't just draw a map any old way. You have to do it accurately, with measurements. I would have to get permission. It would have to go through committees.
You can do all of that later. I'd keep it a secret for now. You wouldn't want anyone else deciding to write the same book. In the library there was a growing sense of urgency that occasionally bordered on panic. The Dutch ambassador, Broekmans, was now in Paris, staying at the Hôtel Royal. He was waiting, biding his time. He was a good ambassador, and he knew how to apply pressure. He knew how it was going to be. First, Cuvier would offer replicas of the specimens. Broekmans would refuse. Cuvier would try again. He would refuse again. Eventually, the Dutch ambassador would agree to take replicas, in exchange for a thick portfolio of political concessions, treaties, and trade agreements. The choreography must be slow if he was to return with all that he had been entrusted to negotiate. I watched Cuvier. Tormented by this waiting, he became increasingly irascible. He found fault with everything. In the second week of October, torrents of rain made the roads almost impassable. Since our descent into the Rue du Pet au Diable, I had barely seen Lucienne or heard from her. I had called at the atelier several times, but there was no one at home. I struggled with jealousy. There were so many questions I had no answers to. At night, sleepless, I walked the streets of the city. Lucienne had sent me a note on the morning of the 8th of October to tell me she was leaving Paris for a few days, but that I was not to be concerned. She had preparations to make and would be back in Paris on the 14th. She hoped, she wrote, that the map might be ready by then. Her tone was cool. On the afternoon of the 14th of October, Lucienne called a meeting. I slipped away from an unfinished illustration of the dwarf warbler and the pile of notes that accompanied it, notes I had yet to turn into a full history of the bird. It was easy to claim illness. I had lost weight. I was pale and hollow-eyed. The address was a building on the Rue du Seine, which ran down the east side of the Jardin. Silvera had rented an old warehouse that faced the high wall, not quite directly opposite Cuvier's museum, but almost. When I arrived, carrying a copy of Deleuze's finished map, it was Manon Laforge who met me at the door that opened off an alleyway down the side of the house. "You look ill," Manon said, once I had slumped into a chair near the fire and pulled off my wet boots. "She's back," I said, glancing towards the door. Yes, she's back. Everything is all right. You have nothing to worry about. Really. She's angry with everyone else, not you." The questions that had kept me walking through long nights all spilled out at once. Was he with her when she went away? Did he go too? Silvera?
She had to talk to him about something.
She's told him that he's Delphine's father.
We disagreed about whether Silvera should know. We quarreled about it. Delphine was beginning to ask questions, and, well, I said it would be wrong not to tell her who her father was. And if she knew, so should he.
Has he seen Delphine? That scene, the father and the daughter, I could hardly bear to imagine that.
No one can see Delphine, Daniel. Jagot has Delphine under guard at the convent at Picpus.
Jagot, I said. Why Jagot?
Jagot is the man who attacked Lucien, Daniel. Jagot is the man who commissioned us to do this job. He will keep Delphine under guard until Lucien brings him the diamond.
Jagot commissioned this. What does he want? The diamond or Silvera?
He wants both, Manon said. He is clever. Silvera will be a big prize. Once he has Silvera in Toulon, the Society of 10,000 will fall, and Jagot's power in France will be beyond question. But if the diamond goes missing, which it will, of course, that's part of Jagot's plan, then no one will suspect him of being the thief. He uses Lucienne because she is one of the best thieves in Paris, and because through her he can reach Silvera.
One thief to catch another, I said. So Jagot is going to make Lucienne betray Silvera to save Delphine.
That's what he wants her to do, yes.
And will she?
Never. She will never betray Silvera. She will think of some other way.
She didn't finish. Saint Vincent had arrived with a bottle of port and some pastries. Lucienne and Silvera arrived together a few minutes later, stooping through the low doorway with wet umbrellas. Silvera nodded to Saint Vincent and Manon, his bow slightly mannered.
"Half of Paris is looking for you, Silvera,"
Saint Vincent said.
"You have put us all at risk coming here."
"The other half of Paris is looking for you, Monsieur Saint Vincent. And all of Paris is looking for all of us, I believe. We could offer ourselves up for a ransom. We would be rich."
"Enough now," Lucien said, glancing at me with a look of burdened weariness.
"Stop. We have work to do. Daniel, do you have the map?"
I unfolded my copy of Deleuze's map of the Jardin and spread it across the table, securing its edges with pots and books. The others took seats around the table. To the north, the wide ribbon of the river ran horizontally across the thick, grainy paper, crisscrossed by quays and bridges. Each section on the map was marked with a number. "There's a key," I said. "Deleuze has numbered everything. I copied it out in English and French."
"It's good," she said. "Very good. Show me, Daniel. Show me everything that is important, everything new. We must make a perfect plan."
The impossibility of the task became increasingly evident as I described what they had in front of them. The 4 entrances to the Jardin, heavily guarded, the locking systems, the gates checked night and day, the keys checked in and out, the windows locked, checked, and double-checked. I put another map on the table, the rectangular floor plan of a 2-story building with 4 sides built around a courtyard. Cuvier's museum.
"And the vault?" Lucien said. "How do we get in?"
I described the entrance to the cellars through room 2 in the museum, an entrance that had once been a trapdoor and opened onto a staircase, now hidden by a plinth on a sliding mechanism that carried a full-size rhino skeleton from Java.
"We will go in on the night of the Ambassador Bruchmann's visit," she said. "The night that Cuvier gives a party in his honor. Those are our orders, the 29th of October. That's 15 days. One of us must watch the Jardin day and night from this room. We will take turns and take notes. We have to know every single routine and schedule."
Lucien came to the empty warehouse later that night and found me struggling to stay awake in a leather chair placed at the window in the dark of the room, drinking brandy, watching the lights from the watchman's lamps moving about in the Jardin, taking notes. Her mouth close to my ear.
"Are you awake?"
I remember the heat of the brandy on my tongue, the mattress we found in the attic and pulled down in front of the fire. Draped in the golden-green brocaded curtains we had found in a box in a downstairs room, she began to describe how she and Manon and Delphine had lived for almost 6 years in the Italian village she wouldn't name, a house by the sea, buried in long grass with no road, a house that was falling to dust. She said she missed Paris.
I always knew we would have to come back, once Delphine was old enough. And I think I always knew something like this would happen. You can't keep running away.
I wish I could erase all your histories, I said. I wish you were entirely mine, and I know that's selfish and stupid, and I know, before you say it, that Lucien Bernard doesn't belong to anyone.
Silvera, you speak of him?
Did you love him? I needed to know, even if I didn't like the answer.
Yes, with a kind of madness. For years I would have done anything for him. It was the same for him. But it was always a fight. It all came to an end in Montmartre, when Silvera killed Jago's man. If he hadn't killed Jago's man would have killed me. So you see, I owe him many things. I was pregnant then, but I didn't know it. By the time I knew, we were hundreds of miles away from each other.
You must sleep, I said, alarmed by the pallor of her skin and unable to bear any more talk of Silvera. You will make yourself ill. Let me do this watch.
I don't want to sleep, she said, her eyes brimming. I have bad dreams. You know about Jago? Manon told you, didn't she?
Yes, I said, relieved not to have to keep her secret. What will you do? There must be something we can do. The convent. Silvera must have men.
Silvera knows too. He wants to take men into the convent. I made him promise not to. I tell him Jago's men have guns. If there are guns in the convent, think what might happen.
But you must do something.
Now that I have the map, Daniel, you must not come back here or to the atelier. You must pretend you do not know us. You must behave as if we have thrown you off.
It's too late, I said. Jago knows I'm caught up in this. You have to find a way out of Jago's trap, for your own sake and Delphine's and the others. Unless you can think of another way, you will all be in the prison at Toulon by the end of the month. And Delphine will be in a Paris orphanage. Have you thought about that?
Will none of you leave me alone?
She said, pulling on her clothes and her boots.
You, Silvera, Manon, you are like flies in my head. I can't think, I can't sleep. All the time you say, Lucienne, you must do something. Lucienne, you must think of something. She is my child, and I can do nothing. There is no way out. There is no other plan. And I am not a magician.
And then she was gone, disappearing behind a series of slammed doors into the night. When I awoke the next morning, stiff and hunched over the windowsill from watching, I found her on the mattress beside the fire, curled up like a child inside the covers, with Deleuze's map laid out on the floor next to her. Lucien Bernard slept for 2 days. Manon sent me a note late on the first day to say she was ill, that she wouldn't wake up, that I was to come immediately and bring my medicine bag. An empty blue glass bottle stood by her bed. Silvera identified it as one he had given her only days before, a bottle that had contained a strong opiate tincture given to him by an apothecary in a village on the coast near Goa. He had given it to her to help her sleep. It contained perhaps 8 or 10 doses, he said. In a moment of desperation, she had drunk the entire bottle. I said there was nothing that would wake her until the effects of the sleeping draught had worn off. I sat up with Alain and Manon through the first night. They talked, one story opening up inside another, shared memories and disagreements about the order and origins of things.
There are many things I don't know about her, Saint Vincent said. She was 16 when I first saw her. She was living with her grandmother and Manon in Marseille. I was her tutor for that summer.
My mother was the housekeeper there, Manon said, glancing in my direction. The old marquise adopted me when she died, but that was before the Revolution. Hearing those stories about Lucienne was like turning the pages of a book, but I still couldn't fit them into anything that looked like a life with a proper trajectory, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Early on the morning of the 18th of October, only a few hours after she had risen from her bed and asked for coffee, fried fish, and a loaf of bread, Lucienne took me back to the Jardin des Plantes. "I have an idea," she said. "I want to see what you think before I tell the others. And don't tell me I'm not well enough. I am perfectly well. We have 12 days. 12 days is not long." "There it is," she said, once we'd made our way through the jardin. "That building with the green roof." She gestured towards a hut in the middle of a small enclosure just outside the botany gallery. "It's listed as number 9 on the map. On the key you've labelled it as an entrance to the quarries. Is that what it is?" "Yes. Inside the hut there's a set of stone steps that lead all the way down to the quarries." "Just as I had hoped. How did it get there?" "Cuvier had it built a few years ago, when he was writing a paper on the rock strata of the Paris basin, I think. He wanted to see the rock layers under the city as far down as it was possible to go. Cuvier uses the quarries for teaching now, occasionally, when he's doing his lectures on fossil bones, but mostly the entrance is unused." "And the steps go all the way down to the main quarry system?" "Straight down, yes." "Can you get me the key to the hut?" "I've no idea where it's kept, but I'll try, if it's important." "Alors, Jagot's orders are that we leave the jardin by the gate at the river entrance on the night of the party. He will wait for us there. That is where we are supposed to hand over the diamond. And although he says he won't, that is where he will arrest us. But instead, we will change things a little. We will leave the jardin a different way. We will go down Cuvier's staircase, through the main quarry system, and then back up into the streets of Paris." "That's brilliant," I said. "Jagot will never know how you got out. It will be as if you've disappeared completely." "Except that Jagot will still have Delphine. You forget that. Now, Daniel, listen to me. I want you to go to Jagot tomorrow and convince him that we have had a quarrel and you want revenge." "He won't believe that." "Tell him you have been betrayed. Tell him you have overheard me talking to Silvera about a theft in the jardin and an escape through the quarries. Give him the details. Tell him we plan to meet in the Passage de Saint-Clair at 7 o'clock in the morning after the party." "But he will be there waiting for you." "Exactement. In the quarries, I know my way, and he does not. Down there we will be running the show. There are nearly 200 miles to disappear into. I think it is time we took ourselves off Jacot's list. We will be magicians. We will put on a little spectacle of our own in our subterranean theatre." "You don't understand, do you?" I shook my head. "Jagot must have his revenge. We can't change that. So we make him think he has won. To do that, we must stage some deaths."
"Why do you tell me all of this now, Monsieur Connor?" Jagot asked, sitting in the pews of the church of Saint-Roch, where I had asked him to meet me.
"I am grateful, of course," he said, peeling an orange.
The juice fell in thick drops onto the brown wool of his trousers.
"But it is a little unusual. You and Lucien Bernard are friends, no? That is what is in my files."
"She has someone else," I said. "There was a fight."
"Monsieur Silvera,"
Jagot said slowly, putting a segment of orange into his mouth.
"Silvera is back in Lucien Bernard's bed, and now you come to me. You are jealous, yes? You want revenge."
"Monsieur," I said, "you told me to watch. You told me to listen. That's what I have been doing, watching and listening." I was glad of the shadows in the church. The less Jagot could see me and read my expression, the better. Jagot, it seemed, had taken the bait. He might have tried to maintain a stony exterior, but his delight was palpable. "And the man who commissioned this robbery," Jagot said, testing me to see how much I knew. "Do you have a name for him?" "No, monsieur," I lied, returning his gaze. "They never use his name." "And you say their rendezvous is in the Passage de Saint-Clair, the morning after the theft. So all I have to do is wait for them to come out, like rats from a sewer. Yes, that is good. Where will they come out, Monsieur Connor? Where will I wait to catch my thieves?" "They separate and go in different directions," I said. "At least that's the plan. They will all come up through different shafts."
"Merde. That means we will have to go down ourselves," Jagot said.
"They know the quarries well. Perhaps you need bait. Something to make sure you keep them there, to stop them slipping through your fingers."
"Good idea, Monsieur Connor."
He paused for a moment, calculating.
"Bien sûr. The child. Perhaps when you have finished working for Cuvier, you will come and work for me. You have a mind that works like chess. Tell Madame Bernard all is forgiven, and you must go with them into the museum on that night, to make sure you bring them to me."
"I can't do that," I said, taking a deep breath. This was the most difficult part of my dissemblance. Jagot must make me his inside man, but I must not agree to his plan too easily. It would make him suspicious. "It's much too risky," I said. "What if they find out that I had told you? Silvera is dangerous. And what about Cuvier?"
"My men tell me that Baron Cuvier has plans for you. Your future is secure. Now, if you will help me to bring in these people who are also the enemies of Cuvier, you will see how your value increases even more for the Baron."
And so, of course, I agreed. The 27th of October arrived, the day of the party in honour of the Dutch ambassador. At 7 o'clock at the gatehouse on the Rue de Seine, 3 uniformed guards checked identity papers and letters of invitation. At the same moment, whilst Cuvier performed for the Dutch ambassador, in another part of Paris, on an unlit road in a region called Picpus, a fiacre followed a woman who was walking towards the convent. Manon Laforge knew she was being followed, of course, but it didn't stop her from feeling anxious. It was all part of the plan she had gone over and over again with Lucienne.
"It's the only way," Lucienne had explained to me. "Jagot knows we are going to escape through the quarries. He will take Delphine from the convent and bring her as a hostage in exchange for the diamond, which is exactly what I want him to do. Once Delphine is in the quarries, I can reach her. But she must not be alone with Jagot's men. She must have someone who can protect her if anything goes wrong. I can't go. It must be Manon."
So this part of the plan had depended on the staged and slow exchange of secrets between me and Jagot over the course of the previous week. I wrote to Jagot, "Manon Laforge will try to rescue the child from the convent on the night of the robbery, 9 o'clock, when your men change shifts. She will come to the side door dressed in a black fur-lined coat. She will carry a parcel, a red soldier's uniform for the child. A disguise." Jagot replied by return, "Excellent. A second hostage will greatly strengthen my hand." The blinds of the fiacre were drawn. It moved very slowly, following Manon through the night as she headed towards the side door of the convent, where a nun took the parcel from her, and a few moments later passed out a small child dressed in a red soldier's uniform.
"Whatever happens now, Delphine, you do exactly as I say, you understand?"
Manon whispered. Delphine nodded. Manon recognized the voice of Jagot as he stepped out of the fiacre and called to her sharply.
"Madame Laforge," he said, "there is nowhere to run, for the safety of the child."
Manon and Delphine were now the hostages of Henri Jagot. In Cuvier's drawing-room, the butler rang a bell for silence. Because the guests were now deep in conversation and reluctant to stop talking, he rang it a second time. Cuvier stepped into the centre of the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we will now take a tour of the Museum of Comparative Anatomy, before we adjourn here for further entertainment." A string of paper lanterns hung from trees marking a path from Cuvier's house round to the museum entrance. The guests gathered outside while Cuvier stood on the threshold. Inside, as if on cue, 2 blue-liveried servants pulled open the enormous doors. The hall in front of us was full of human skeletons, arranged as if they were standing there in the flesh, all facing the door. Several guests gasped as the smoky light fell down through the bones, giving the effect of elongation, as if the bone people were stepping or sliding towards the door. A woman pulled her shawl more closely around herself. Skulls, ears, legs. I tried to remember the order of the rooms I knew so well that led off from the hall and from the landing upstairs. Cuvier's men eased us into room 2, the carnivore skeletons. Here, in the absence of a chandelier, the servants carried lamps that swung from side to side so that, as we walked the length of the room, the lamps cast ovals of light. I manoeuvred myself back towards the doorframe, checking that the servants were in front of me, checking where the lights were. I stepped through the doorway and headed down the staircase lined with shelves displaying the skulls of horses, stags and dolphins, then back into the hall, where I slipped a few drops of Silvera's strong opiate from a blue perfume bottle into each of the decanters of expensive Madeira that had been arranged on the table for the guests to drink after the speeches. Then I found the door to the cupboard under the staircase, unlocked as I knew it would be, and stepped inside. When the last glimpses of light had disappeared and the voices had gone silent, I pushed open the door of my cupboard and stepped into a lighter shade of dark. I waited. A hand appeared at the 4th window from the right. The hand pushed in the glass from the other side without a sound. A rope was thrown, and I caught it. First 1, then 2, then 3 hunched figures balanced for a moment on the threshold of the window, then sprung silently into the room. Lucienne was closest, breathing a little fast. "The last guests left around 20 minutes ago," I told her. "Cuvier had several glasses of Madeira once the Dutch ambassador had gone. The opiate worked. Cuvier announced he was exhausted and disappeared off to his rooms. The servants will have helped themselves to the last of the wine in those decanters. From what I can tell, they're all asleep." 4 figures crouched around the wooden platform on which the rhino was mounted, and slid the skeleton 3 feet to the side. On the floor I could see the dark outline of a trapdoor. Silvera pulled it open. It was dank and musty in the cellar. "Don't be distracted by anything," Lucienne said. "We must concentrate. The crate we are looking for has a label with a phoenix on it. It's in the 4th room on the right of this corridor."
"You won't take anything," Silvera said to Lucienne. "Only the 2 objects we agreed on."
"No, of course not. The diamond's the only piece we can sell, and the lock of Napoleon's hair will be our calling card."
Once we were in the 4th room and the crate had been found, Saint Vincent began to unwrap a series of metal tools and levers.
"David,"
Lucienne said.
"you have the replica?"
"Bien sûr." He lifted the diamond replica from his pocket. It hung in the air like a fish glinting on a line in dark waters.
"It will buy us a little time, if we need it."
Saint Vincent and Silvera continued pulling away the layers of the crate they had unscrewed, lifting the planks to one side, undressing the Montserrat cabinet. I swung the lamp round onto its inlaid surfaces.
"It's a more complicated locking system than I expected," Lucienne said. "I want Daniel in here with me."
Lucienne produced a roll of midnight blue velvet and silk from her bag.
"Tools," she said. "Arrange them from left to right, exactly as I hand them to you. Pull over that box there. I need a table. Now, take off your jacket and put that across the top. Yes, like that. Concentrate.
I passed Lucienne the master key. She slipped it into the lock. With a single turn to the right, the panel doors swung open to reveal 25 drawers, arranged around a central arched display case. A tiny metal ring was attached to each drawer, and each was decorated with the silhouette of a phoenix, wings outstretched.
Don't touch, Lucienne said quickly. You have to do it in the right sequence. Touch one randomly, and the others will deadlock against you. Then we'll never get in.
There are no keyholes, I said.
The birds are the keys.
What are you doing? I asked.
Feeling the wings for a number and sequence pattern.
Lucienne's delicate fingers played over the birds, pulling the drawers out one by one. She took my hand.
Come closer. Now that they are open, the central cupboard should be easy. Put your finger just here, on this mechanism. Pull it a little towards you, and then turn it sharply to the right.
Nothing happened.
Too heavy-handed. Try again. Do it with your eyes closed.
I did. It slid away suddenly, yielding itself. Inside there was only one object, about a foot high like a miniature cathedral, complete with a fish-scaled spire and flying buttresses.
Denon's reliquary, she said. See, the drawers in the middle section are all labelled. They hold the powdered bones of people who have become legends.
I examined the reliquary. Denon had given over one side to his new Napoleon relic collection. There were 6 drawers, one filled with the lock of hair given to Denon in Egypt.
Look,
I said, lifting a jewel from an unlabelled drawer.
The satar diamond. 1 diamond,
she said, clapping her hands together.
And 1 lock of an emperor's hair.
Once Lucienne had given the order to put out the light, we climbed the staircase, closed the trapdoor, slid the rhinoceros skeleton back into place. Then we were out through the window and into the garden. Somewhere over to the right we heard the sound of Jagot's dogs.
Can you run?
She asked. We reached the hut in the centre of the field. Silvera and Saint-Vincent had gone ahead and left the door open. Down 49 steps, and we were standing at the entrance to the quarries.
Silvera has left us a mark, she said, holding up the lamp to show me. All we have to do is follow the trail through to the Passage de Saint-Clair. That's what we agreed, if we got separated.
We reached a crossing point where passageways met and where the ceiling stretched far above us. It was supported by pillars, 5 or 6 roughly hewn blocks of stone placed on top of one another, without mortar or cement.
1 good strike with a mallet, Lucienne said, and you could knock one of these stones out. Then the whole ceiling would come in.
We could just hear the barking of dogs somewhere behind us. Are the dogs loose? I asked.
No, they keep them on ropes, but they will be listening for us, sniffing us out. Listen, they are too close.
Now I could hear voices ahead as well as behind.
They've surrounded us. Put out the light.
A shot. Someone had shot a gun. The detonation echoed around the vault. Stones fell into the pool of water at our feet. The ball from the carbine had struck the ceiling just a few feet above my head.
You fool! You'll bring the whole city down on top of us. Put down the gun.
Jagot shouted from somewhere close by.
He thinks we have a gun, I whispered. We do, she said.
I could see the glint of metal as she pulled something from the folds of her clothing.
Madame Bernard, we have your friend Manon Laforge, and the child. Such an interesting child. A credit to you, madame.
Mama? Delphine's voice echoed in the tunnels, muffled quickly by an unseen hand.
All you have to do, Jagot called out, is give the boy the diamond, and then send him towards me. Slowly. Monsieur Connor,
There was a low whistle from where the gunshot sound had come. I had last heard that sound in the Rue du Pet au Diable. "What's that?" I asked. "Joachim and the other boys. Silvera must have realized we were going to be cut off by Jagot's men before we reached the passage, so he sent for them." The air had been thick, but now I could feel a slight movement around us. Above us, where the ball had hit the ceiling, a deep crack had opened up in the stone. Dust was falling around us. There was a scuffle, more dust, the gasp and cry of a child. I could hear several voices shouting, and above them Jagot.
"Where is she? Where is the child? Find the child!"
Then came Manon's voice. "Delphine's safe, Lucien. Joachim and his boys have her."
"Daniel,"
Lucien whispered.
"it's time. Take this, the diamond. Tell Jagot you have it."
"I have the diamond!" I shouted. "I have the diamond!"
"Now, walk towards him," she said. "Walk towards the light down there."
Then suddenly she pulled me back towards her. She put her hands on my shoulders and brushed down my suit, smoothing out its folds.
"This suit has seen better days," she said, kissing me. "Now walk. Walk, or I will shoot you myself."
As I staggered forward, there was another explosion. Rock falling, noise, dust. A blow to the head. I swear I saw feathers as I fell, great wings beating down there in the darkness.
I was lucky, they said, very lucky. Lucien's gun had gone off accidentally, they told me, just as she released me. Her gun had fired a shot upwards into the ceiling and had dislodged one of the stone pillars, already weakened by the first shot. This had brought down the ceiling. Lucien Bernard, David Silvera, and their child Delphine Bernard, Manon Laforge, and Alain Saint-Vincent had all been buried under the rockfall. Or at least, Jagot thought so. Cuvier did too. But who knows for sure? The quarries do. I do. Or at least I came to know. Not by sudden revelation, an encounter on a train or a face recognized in a crowd. No. I waited, and piece by piece, I put fragments together. One of them was in a new encyclopedia published in Paris, and all the rage in London in the 1830s. There were entries by people whose names I half remembered, including one on corals and time. I recognized the voice. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was no signature to the entry, just the initials L.B. In 1818, the Times carried a report of a diamond that sold for a considerable sum in Madras, India. It had, some said, been stolen during a robbery in the Jardin des Plantes. What the Times journalist didn't report was that a diamond had been recovered by the police from that robbery, but that it had subsequently turned out to be a paste replica. I stayed in Paris through the rest of the winter of 1815 as a much-valued and depended-upon secretary to Baron Cuvier. But when I was sent notice of a position at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, I took it. I was ready to leave Paris. If I turned away from philosophical and political questions, it was not because they stopped being important to me, but because I wanted to practice medicine. And for the last 40 years, that is what I have done. I still think of her. Silvera told Lucienne she should leave philosophical questions alone. Some things were simply unknowable. But there's a book, Silvera, I want to say, that everyone is talking about all across Europe. The author, an English squire, son of a respectable family, works on coral atolls. Like Lucienne, he reads corals as if they were books or clocks. He thinks like she did. The author, Charles Darwin, the grandson of Erasmus Darwin, builds his argument with the ordinary things, just as she did.
not with corals, but with bees and pigeons and earthworms. There is grandeur in this view of things, he writes, reaching for the sublime through the infinitely slow accumulation of facts. She had seen Red Sea coral spawn, she said. Just once a year, down there on the coral reefs, the dark waters explode into white smoke clouds. She had said, "The fishermen say it's the moon that makes them spawn." And I said, "How can they see the moon? They have no eyes." "Perhaps they have other ways of seeing and knowing," she had said. "Perhaps we all do. There's grandeur in that."
Dan Stevens was reading The Coral Thief by Rebecca Stott, published by Weidenfeld and Nicholson. The abridger was Viv Beebe and the producer Elizabeth Allard.